SEC Advisory Group Investor Advisory Committee has requested formal crypto guidance from the agency. The committee is made up of a group of people from TradFi, academia, and consumer advocacy groups. The letter sent last week said the SEC should consider issuing a request for comment regarding areas where additional guidance is needed related to the application of the federal securities laws to crypto assets. It then said that the SEC can use this input to craft additional guidance or propose new rules. Now, that's the good part of what they said. The rest of it, they pretty much are agreeing with everything that the SEC is doing and are saying that they encourage more enforcement action. Zach, I see those Mr. Burns hands going over there. What do you make of this letter?
Ain't no one falling for this trick again. No one thinks the open door. Come on in, talk to us. We're friendly regulators. We like you. Have some candy. No one is doing that. They've done that for years. And every time someone goes in from the crypto world and says, hey, here's some constructive feedback, historically, those people have been targeted further down the road for enforcement actions. So none of this good cop, bad cop stuff is going to work. And clearly what's on the line here is, again, the important part is we think crypto should comport with existing securities laws, right? This is not revolutionary technology. This is not a car versus a horse buggy. This is a slight improvement to existing realities. And therefore, the SEC thinks, oh, it should comport with those existing regulations. Now, many people in crypto, and I'm very sympathetic to this, see these things as significantly different than existing securities, right? This does not necessarily represent, future earnings or future profits to be expected from the work of other companies. That's what securities apply toward, right? These are, in some cases, adequately decentralized protocols that exist across the world that are different. And I think what the SEC is trying to assert here is that, no, they're not different. And that's still very much contested and still very much debated. But yeah, the good cop, bad cop shtick here, I don't know. I'm not buying it. I think that ship has sailed in terms of people within the crypto industry who are looking to engage at that level. I think at this point, people are pretty rightfully skeptical of some of these claims that we want feedback that can be productively used in the quest toward informed regulation. Doesn't really seem to be the case with the SEC's current sort of warpath approach. But I don't know, Will, you gonna go get the candy?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. I got a few thoughts here. And the one is, who set this advisory group, right? Did the SEC, the current SEC administration set this advisory group, or was it in the past? Has it been there historically? That sort of like inform you, right? Because the past SEC chairman was actually pretty pro-crypto, right? So now we have a change of seat, and Gary Gensler, the last 2 years, has been pretty anti-crypto, labeling most things as security. So it kind of depends on like where these people were like put into this advisory group and when. The second thing on that's sort of interesting here is the fact that they do agree mostly with what Gary Gensler is doing, but they're asking for more information, just like everyone else in the crypto space, right? They're saying like, hey, we need actual standards and guidelines for what is a security and what is not, based on how you guys interpret the digital asset space. The last thing here is that they do agree that most things are probably security. So they do agree with Gary Gensler's take that most things besides Bitcoin are security. That is not great for the industry to have like this advisory body just sort of come up and like cheerlead on what Gary Gensler is doing. Apparently, they don't like the way he's doing it. They don't like this enforcement action policy that they just go after any project that sort of like raises too much suspicions or brings his head above the waterline. That seems to be something they don't want. But they do want clear guidance, and then they probably want to go after all these different projects for being quote unquote securities. Jen, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so the letter also argued against legislation that would establish separate treatment of crypto. And so that kind of feels like the complete opposite of going out, finding out what the industry needs, and then setting rules that cater to the industry. So that little tidbit made me, think like, is this all for show? How much do they actually agree with this one statement, given all these other things they said? And it made me think of A16Z's State of Crypto report, which was released this week. There's a whole new section in the report on regulation, and there's a chart that shows, I think it's the last 5 years maybe in crypto, and we can see like a steady decline when it comes to developer activity in the US and also US people accessing the top crypto sites. And so here we have the data in front of us. We can see how this confusion in the regulatory sphere is pushing crypto offshore, and I think that they are achieving their goals. Will?
Okay, last thought from this article is interesting.
Okay.
The advisory body is saying that they do not want any different special treatment for crypto assets that they think are securities based on legislation, which is a pretty progressive interpretation of the SEC's regulatory purpose, right? So the SEC has been given the power by Congress to enforce regulations that are already on the books. And this advisory body is saying, quote, "We think it is very unfortunate and disturbing that there are legislative proposals to carve crypto assets out of the federal securities laws and undermine investor protection." So what we're seeing here essentially is the SEC and the SEC body, this advisory body, saying, hey, we want to actively inform what the legislation looks like, and we don't want the legislators who are voted into Congress to be able to do that. I think that's pretty disturbing, but it's nothing that we haven't seen to date from the SEC. Zach, to you.
I mean, it's the give and take of the governmental process, right? You got the legislative branch, you got the executive branch, they try to inform each other, whatever. I think the interesting thing here is this is probably an allusion to the stablecoin bill. There's many sort of stablecoin provisions that was initially thought that the stablecoin legislation would be the one that would be more likely to be passed, right? But this could be one of those things that they're saying, hey, we shouldn't be carving these out and treating them as something different, when in some respects, potentially the way some stablecoins are manifested, those look more like securities and should be regulated as such, right? So I think that is actually quite discouraging for the idea that, at least on the stablecoin side, there could be some certainty, again, forced through the legislative branch, that gives stablecoin issuers and others operating within the space some clear guidance that they've long clamored for. So I think that may be the subtext on that little bit, but that definitely stood out, Will. And I think you're wise to point that out, that, hey, the SEC is angling for this is their turf. They want the whole pie. They want the whole thing. And Bitcoin is not sort of specifically mentioned here, to my knowledge. We know of Gary Gensler's comments on Bitcoin being potentially the only one that isn't a security, and that should be more within the purview of the commodities regulator. But again, all this stuff is still being so hotly contested. And I think, again, this is just what we see after the FTX implosion in November. All these things sort of coming home to roost and actually sort of hitting the ground with enforcement actions, proposals, etc. We talked about yesterday the budget ramping up their efforts to bring in enforcement staff to make this again a top priority, as mentioned here again. So yeah, this is the FTX fallout. It's getting intense. They're just ratcheting up the crackdown. It's serious business. I don't know. Jen, come on, give us the last word here.
It's interesting that you bring up the FTX fallout. It feels like that happened years ago, and it only happened in November. And so, Zach, I think you're exactly right. This is the fallout. We can expect to continue to see fallout, but hopefully, once the storm settles, we can get some clarity in the industry so we can move forward.